You gotta say, the Appalachian Trail, it's got a reputation. Anyone who's hiked it, they know. Especially in June. The woods around Asheville, they get so green, it's suffocating. A vibrant, overwhelming green, like it wants to swallow you whole. And these are old woods, ancient. And that feeling of being watched, it's always there. It just hangs in the air. That day, me, my boyfriend, and our dog were just trying to find some peace. We set up a makeshift camp in a small clearing, right on the bank of the river we'd just spent all day fighting. And fighting is putting it mildly. It was a nightmare. We almost died. Think about it, getting sucked into a rapid that wasn't on any map, getting spun around, and almost getting pinned against a submerged log. You know those strainers, those death traps. Once they grab you, they keep you under. Forever. We made it to shore. We were safe. But that cold, visceral fear, it was still stuck deep in our bones. We were exhausted, mentally shattered. All we wanted was a hot dinner. And maybe, just maybe, the roar of that river could drown out the memory of the afternoon. But this was our fatal mistake, the location. Our campsite was maybe 10 feet off the main trail. I'm not kidding. 10 feet. A few steps, and you were on the path. The river was right at our backs. You know what that means? It means we had no cover. We were completely exposed, like a little stage, for anyone walking that trail to see. And as the sun started to set, the shadows got long and distorted, turning the river from sparkling green to a cold, flat gray. That exposed feeling, it suddenly became very, very real. And trying to shake off the adrenaline from the afternoon, and maybe because our stash was running low, we did what seemed logical at the time. We took some edibles. We just wanted to blur the edges, take the stress down. And that was a terrible decision. Look, you never, ever dull your senses when you are that exposed. It started getting dark. That real thick dusk. My boyfriend was already passed out in the hammock, stock still. I was just lying on a towel by the water's edge, listening to the river. The edibles started to hit. I felt floaty, warm, right on the edge of sleep. And of course, that's always when it happens. Crunch. A sound. Sharp. Clear, even over the roar of the river. Footsteps. On the gravel. Right behind me. Right then. The edible started to kick in. A soft, pleasant fog settled over my brain. All the sharp edges of the world, they just blurred. The horror of the afternoon faded, becoming just a dull, distant throb. But there was one problem. It made me slow. Meanwhile, every single sound in the woods, the insects, the leaves, the roar of the river, it was like the volume was cranked all the way up. A wall of noise. In the hammock, my boyfriend was just a still, unmoving shape. In that moment, I realized I was essentially alone. And that's when he appeared. He didn't just arrive, Hashanashe. He emerged from the trail. He stepped out of the thickening, dark shadows of the evening so suddenly, I swear it was like he just materialized from the trees themselves. I jolted, straight up. He had a pack on, a massive, professional one. He was wearing a faded Appalachian Trail shirt, dark with sweat. My first confused thought was that he was mumbling. He was walking toward us, not really making eye contact, but saying something about his trash. He held a small, crumpled plastic bag in his hand. I had no idea what was happening. The edible was making my brain lag. This guy, was he trying to give me his trash? It took a second to register the uniform, the shirt, the pack, the trekking poles strapped to his side. This was a thru hiker, and he wanted us to take his trash. In this community, that's a normal thing. Sometimes they ask campers, people they think have cars, to pack out their trash for them. A perfectly reasonable request. But here was the problem. We weren't in the middle of nowhere. A 5-minute walk down the trail was the boat launch, Civilization. It had a parking lot, bathrooms, and a giant metal dumpster. Literally, a 5-minute walk. I tried to be helpful. "Hey man," I said, pointing down the path. "There's a dumpster. Like, right down there. Super close." I just assumed he was exhausted and missed it. That should have been the end of the conversation. He should have said, "Oh, sweet, thanks," and just kept walking. But he didn't. He stopped, turned his entire body to face me, and just stared. His eyes. That was the first thing that set off a real alarm, sharp and loud, yes, inside my head. These were not the tired, weathered eyes of a hiker. They were empty, almost hollow, and yet, at the same time, they were burning. With this strange, unsettled intensity, he hadn't just seen things in those woods. It felt like he'd left a part of himself back there. He looked straight at me, completely ignoring what I had just said about the dumpster. I knew it, right then. The trash wasn't the point. It was just the opening. It was the excuse he needed to stop. The key he was using to let himself into our camp. He smirked. But it wasn't a friendly smile. It was a thin, tight smirk that didn't reach his hollow eyes at all. He let the small trash bag dangle from his finger. "I know about the dumpster," he said, his voice surprisingly gravelly. "But I want to be done with this now, and I'll make it worth your while." As he said it, he reached into the side pocket of his pack, the one facing away from my boyfriend, and pulled out a big, clear Ziploc bag. It was thick. It was stuffed with extremely high-quality-looking weed. My eyes went wide. You have to understand, we were almost completely out. And this guy was holding what looked like a small fortune. "If you take this bag," he said, his voice dropping even lower, like he was sharing a secret, "I'll give you some of this." My head was spinning. The edible, the shock from the afternoon, the pure weirdness of this guy. It all collided. My brain couldn't process the logic. Why? Why would anyone trade a huge, valuable stash of weed just to avoid a 5-minute walk? It made no sense. It was too good of a deal. And you know, a deal that good is always the biggest red flag. This wasn't a trade. This was a bribe. He wasn't bargaining for a service. He was buying his way into our space. But I was in my early 20s. I was a partier, and I was still freaked out from the kayak. And honestly, I was never going to turn down free weed. The tiny, rational voice in my head screaming, "This is wrong," was completely drowned out by the much louder, greedier voice screaming, "Free weed? Sure," I mumbled, my own voice sounding distant. "Whatever, man. We'll throw it out." Instantly, his tense, bizarre energy just vanished. It was replaced by a practiced charm. Something slick, artificial. "Great, great," he said. He reached into his bag, scooped out a dense, sticky handful, and dropped it into my palm. It was tacky. Then he casually tossed the small, crumpled trash bag, which I swear couldn't have weighed more than a few ounces, into our camp's large trash bag. Deal done. And then, before I could even say, "You're welcome," he turned. "You guys got an extra beer? Mind if I hang out for one? It's been a long day." He asked it so casually, like a neighbor leaning over the fence. And just like that, boom, The real price of the free weed became crystal clear. He wasn't paying me to take his trash. He was paying for time. He was paying to stay. I hesitated. I glanced toward the hammock, but my boyfriend was still flying. The guy just stood there, watching me, waiting. And I did what so many of us do when we're uncomfortable. I rationalized. He's probably just lonely. It happens on the trail. They call it trail madness. You know, desperate to talk to a normal person. We're not doing anything. What's one beer? Sure, I said. That was the last normal moment of the evening. That was the exact second. I unlatched the gate myself and invited the monster in. He popped the beer I handed him and just sat his ass down on our cooler. He didn't ask. He just sat, rooting himself into our small, safe space like he owned it. He took a long, deep pull from the beer, and in that instant, as his eyes idly scanned our camp, the tent, the dog, a realization hit me that was so cold. Oh, it cut right through the warm fog of the edible. He had seen me from the trail. He had seen a girl lying alone. That's right. The hammock was set back a bit, obscured by the tent. My boyfriend, lying that still, would have been completely invisible to a passerby. This man didn't happen to be walking by. He had chosen us, the trash bag, the weed. It was all just an excuse. The icy dread creeping up my spine. It wasn't the fear of being hit on. No, this was primal. This was prey fear. I had been assessed as an easy target. I had been stalked, as if my panic had woken him. The hammock suddenly stirred. My boyfriend's head popped up, groggy, disoriented. His voice was thick with sleep and the edible. Hey, what's going on? Who's this? I kept my eyes locked on the hiker's face. He wasn't just surprised. He flashed a look. It was fast, just a split second, but I saw it. It wasn't surprise. It was annoyance, pure, unfiltered irritation. It was the look of a predator whose meal suddenly grew claws, the look of a plan being ruined. He thought I was alone. That look confirmed everything, and my blood ran cold. He recovered fast, though, slipped that slick, friendly mask right back on. "Oh, hey, man," he said, his voice suddenly, artificially loud. He laughed, a short, barking sound. It didn't sound like a laugh at all. He held up his hands in a sort of mock surrender. "Don't worry," he said, looking at my boyfriend, but gesturing toward me. "I'm not one of those creepy guys." A sharp, cold silence fell. The river suddenly sounded deafening. "I'm not one of those creepy guys. You know." That sentence, it just lands like a fire alarm in the middle of the night. Innocent people don't have to say they're innocent. Normal people don't barge into your camp and immediately need to clarify that they aren't dangerous. That sentence, it only does one thing. It plants the very idea it's trying to deny. Well, man, I thought, my heart hammering my ribs. I really hope you're not. So now we were stuck. He was on our cooler, drinking our beer. He'd already paid his entrance fee with a handful of weed. How do you kick him out? Kicking him out could make things explode. And the situation already felt fragile. So we did what everyone does. We tried to be normal. I tried to make small talk. "So, you hiking the whole trail?" My voice sounded strained. He answered normally enough. "Yeah, been out for a few months. Told a story about a trail stop." But the words were normal. The delivery wasn't. His eyes were still hollow. He looked through us. It felt rehearsed. My boyfriend and I kept shooting each other looks. The "what the hell is up with this guy" look. The air was so thick, you couldn't breathe. We had to do something. Desperately. And so, In a moment of truly catastrophic decision-making, we decided to smoke. We thought, maybe he just needs to chill out. Maybe we need to chill out. And, of course, we had to offer it to him. It was his weed, after all. We thought this was the key. This would make him human again. Turn him into just another stoner by the river. It would reset everything. He took the pipe. He took a hit. And he coughed. And that is exactly when things got truly bizarre. He took the pipe, lit it, and inhaled. A long, deep pull. A second later, he exploded. A coughing. Look, this wasn't a normal, choked on the smoke cough. This was a spasmodic, guttural, deep sounds, like he was trying to dredge something up, something that had been stuck in his lungs for a month. We, of course, laughed. We were stoners. We were used to seeing people get too high and act weird. We figured he was just greening out. He'd sit there, get nauseous, and eventually just leave. We were wrong. So wrong. When the coughing stopped, the man who was there before, the trail talker, the guy joking about not being creepy, he was gone. Something else was sitting there. It was like a switch had been flipped. A circuit. Broken. The weed hadn't just gotten him high. It had unlocked something inside him. He started talking, and talking, and talking, but his voice was so low, we couldn't understand a single word. A deep, steady, gravelly mumble. It wasn't a conversation. He was broadcasting. He just stared at the river, which was pitch black now, and talked to it, like he was confessing his sins. To the rapids. I tried to act like I was listening, leaning in, trying to respond, but I had no idea what he was saying. He wasn't talking to us. But this was the creepiest part. Every few minutes, he would just stop the monologue. Abruptly, he'd snap his head around and stare right at one of us. Just stare, waiting, like he had just asked us a question, waiting for an answer to a question we hadn't heard. The silence would just stretch, thick, suffocating, until one of us couldn't take it. Oh, right. Ha 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 ha. I'd force out this strangled little laugh. Totally, man. And he would nod, a slow, serious nod, like I had just said something profound. And then he'd turn right back to the river and resume the whisper. This insane loop, over and over. And this wasn't for a few minutes. He slammed at least 3 more beers, one after the other. He smoked 2 cigarettes at the same time. He was an anchor. He had anchored himself there. He would not leave. The sun was long gone. The fire was the only light, casting these flickering, demonic shadows on his face. Finally, we just gave up. We stopped responding. We turned away, just talking quietly to each other, pretending he wasn't there. We hoped being ignored would be enough to make him leave. It didn't work. It just agitated him. When he realized we weren't paying attention to him anymore, he pulled out his phone. We heard that familiar ding, ding. Siri. He started talking to his phone, but his irritation with us, he transferred it to the machine. He started screaming at Siri, full on, aggressively. Siri, you don't understand, he roared, his voice cracking. And then, just a terrifying burst of rage. Siri! You've... And then, click. He went silent, as suddenly as he had erupted. The contrast, It was horrifying. The insects, the roar of the river, they all rushed back in to fill the space. But over it all was a new, deadly, oppressive quiet. He slowly, deliberately lowered the phone. He turned his head, those same hollow, probing eyes, looking right through us. The firelight carved the planes of his face, making him look skeletal. He cleared his throat. "Hey," he said. His voice was now terrifyingly calm, almost academic. "Real quick, I've been thinking about this. On a scale of 1 to 10, how much, do I look like a serial killer?" My boyfriend and I looked at each other. No, it wasn't a glance. It was a lock. A full, non-verbal conversation that happened in less than a second. "Did he just say what I think he said?" "Yes, he did. This is not a joke. We are in danger. Do not provoke him. Just answer the question." All the blood in my body just froze. The fog from the edible vanished, instantly, burned away by a dose of pure, uncut terror. This guy, this unstable, unpredictable man who had forced his way into our camp, was now asking us to rate his serial killer vibes. We both snapped our heads back to him and did the only thing we could. We laughed, a horrible sound, thin, high-pitched, and sharp with panic. "Oh, man," my boyfriend said, his voice straining for casual. "Like, a 1? Definitely a 1. Not at all." "Yeah, totally," I squeaked, my voice an octave too high. "You just look like a normal hiker. Dude, for sure." We tried to play it off like it was the most normal, hilarious joke we'd ever heard. But we were both thinking, what the After that moment, it was done. The charade was over. The social contract was ripped to shreds. I looked at my boyfriend. No, he is not welcome here anymore. I got up, climbed into the hammock. He did too. We huddled in there together, a small, cramped fortress, deliberately turning our backs to the man. We just sat there, whispering in small, urgent voices. "What do we do?" "Don't look at him. He has to go." And the man sat there, silent, watching us. He let the silence stretch for one long, agonizing minute. Finally, he sighed. "Well," he said, "I guess I'll have one more cigarette, and then I'll go." I swear to you, it was the longest cigarette I have ever witnessed in my entire life. We didn't talk to him. We just stared at that single, tiny, red ember, glowing in the dark. It was our clock. We watched it flare up as he inhaled and dim as he exhaled. It was torture. It just wouldn't end. I just stared at it, praying, "Be done, be done, be done and get out, leave." Finally, he stood up. The click of his pack buckles snapping shut sounded like a gunshot in the quiet. He shouldered his gear, gave us one last, unreadable look, and then, without another word, he turned and vanished into the absolute blackness of the trail. He was gone, but the fear he left behind wasn't. It was thick, tangible. It was pitch black when he left, and we knew what that meant. He wasn't going far. He was just going to make his own camp. Somewhere nearby, probably just a few hundred yards down the trail. That night was one of the worst nights of my life. We knew this guy was coming back to murder us. We were certain of it. We didn't sleep. We sat in the tent, clutching our dog, jumping at every single sound. And the trail wasn't quiet. All night, people were still hiking through, their headlamps cutting beams through the trees. Every single time, we held our breath. One group was another couple we'd seen earlier, who seemed super high themselves. Were they with him? Had he talked to them? Every twig snap was him. Every rustle in the leaves was him circling us. We actually made a plan for what we would do if he came back. Plan is generous. It was a desperate last resort. The plan was, if we heard a zipper, we would grab the dog, slice open the back of the tent, and just jump into the river. Yes, the same cold, dangerous river that almost killed us that afternoon. Just jump in and float and pray that we eventually hit the boat launch downstreams. Anyway, he didn't show up that night. We never saw him again. The sun finally came up, and we packed our camp in what must be a world record 10 minutes and all but ran back to the car. Maybe the guy was just severely, socially inept. Maybe he'd just been alone in the woods for too long and his brain had snapped a little. But maybe he really did have some creepy, terrifying intentions, and he was just feeling us out. I grew up in southern Appalachia, in western North Carolina, about a 30-minute drive from the town of Asheville. The hills and valleys, or hollers, as we call them, of the Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest on Earth. Some of the rock formations here are over 1 billion years old, which, quite literally, means they were here long before life ever crawled onto land. And like most things that have existed that long on this planet, there are strange anomalies scattered throughout, some benevolent, some not so much. Take the Brown Mountain Lights, for example. My whole life, I have never once felt threatened or uneasy watching them from Wise Man's View. They're not good, and they're not evil. They simply are. On the gentler side, if you ever walk past the old abandoned church near my parents' property, you can sometimes feel this warm, comforting energy. It's like that first truly warm day of summer, when the sun isn't too hot, but everything just feels right. Well, this story isn't about one of those anomalies. This one is about something that was definitely malevolent. About a decade ago, I was taking a night class at AB Tech. That's Asheville Buncombe Technical Community College, studying to become an auto mechanic. I'd clock out of my part-time job, head straight to class around 2 in the afternoon, and usually make it home by about 10:30, depending on traffic. Every night, I drove the same route in my old 1973 Dodge W200 pickup. Sometimes, when the routine got dull, I'd take a different way home, get off Interstate 40, and wind my way through some back roads. But on this particular evening, I decided to just stick to I-40. I was tired and only wanted to get home and crash. It was a Thursday night, and I didn't have class the next day. My plan was to get some rest, wake up early, and go hiking to watch the sunrise. When I took the exit toward my parents' place, the night seemed to grow thicker. The damp mountain air suddenly felt still. The usual chorus of nighttime sounds, crickets, owls, frogs, all went dead silent. It was as if the entire forest was holding its breath. I've never been the anxious type, but in that moment, something felt off. A primal kind of unease, the kind that crawls up your spine, and I couldn't explain why. I slowed down at the bottom of the ramp, ready to turn onto the road that led home. That's when I noticed the gas station at the exit, the one right near my parents' turnoff, was completely dark. No lights at all. That station's a 24-hour truck stop. It's always lit up. It's the only beacon of civilization on that stretch of road. I told myself it was probably just a power outage and tried to shake it off. But that feeling, that something was very, very wrong, wouldn't go away. I shifted gears carefully. the old truck clunking along, trying not to make any more noise than usual. I leaned forward over the steering wheel, glancing up through the windshield. There weren't any stars. None. That was highly unusual. If you've ever been out in the Appalachian countryside, you know that on clear nights, you can see the Milky Way spread out across the sky. For there to be no stars at all meant one of two things: heavy cloud cover or something else entirely. The sky wasn't just cloudy that night. It was a black, empty void. I kept driving. The road ahead was nothing more than a black tunnel, carved out by the weak glow of my truck's headlights. The silence was deafening, and I felt this cold chill, like something was watching me from the woods. It was as if 1,000 unseen eyes were staring at me, just beyond that thin circle of light. As I took a particularly sharp left turn and downshifted along a short straightaway before the next curve, I glanced toward that old, decaying barn I always passed on this stretch. I found myself wondering how long it had been there, how much of civilization it had quietly watched rise and fall. Then, in the blink of an eye, a massive dog, thin and sickly looking, bolted out right in front of my truck, no more than 10 feet ahead. Betsy, that's what I call my truck, was a good old machine, but she wasn't made to stop fast, and I slammed the brakes to the floor. The tires screamed, tearing through the dead silence of the night, and I heard a fence post I'd left in the bed of the truck bounce up, slam against the side, and drop back down with a heavy thud. The truck skidded sideways and came to a stop in a cloud of burning rubber. My heart was pounding out of my chest. My first thought was, oh God, now I've got to tell the neighbors I just ran over their dog. Around here, that kind of thing doesn't go over well. Depending on the dog and the owner, it can cause real trouble. As I sat there, breathing in the sharp, acrid smell of burnt rubber, another scent crept in through the open window, something from outside. It was the stench of rotting flesh. That's not a smell you ever forget once you've caught it. It's sickly sweet, thick, like an animal carcass left out in the summer sun for a week. At the time, I didn't pay much attention to it. I just figured maybe something had died nearby on the roadside. I was more worried about explaining myself to an angry neighbor. Finally, I told myself, all right, better go see whose dog it was. I pressed the clutch and shifted into reverse. And when I glanced into the rearview mirror, illuminated by the ghostly white light of the reverse lamps, I saw it. The dog. Only, it wasn't on all fours anymore. It was standing upright, like a man. A man easily over 10 feet tall. Only then did I realize something terrifying. The hood of my truck stands at least 5 feet high, and when that dog had been on all fours, its shoulders were just about level with it. That size didn't make any sense, and now, there it was, standing on 2 legs in the pale light behind me, towering over the roof of my truck. When it slowly turned its head back toward my truck, I only caught a glimpse of the creature's form. I can only describe it vaguely, because in that moment of terror, my mind outright refused to record details. I couldn't accept what I was seeing. It wasn't a dog. It wasn't a man. It was somewhere between the two, and yet, completely separate from either. Its skin hung off that emaciated frame like torn strips of raccoon flesh. Patchy, matted fur, dirt, and clumps of mud clung to its legs like some grotesque disease. The right arm looked a little longer than the left, and both limbs drooped in an unnatural way, unlike any animal or human I'd ever seen. It didn't move like a natural predator, or like a wounded animal. It moved like a shadow dragged out of a nightmare. As it slowly came to, it turned and stared straight into the rearview mirror, as if it knew exactly where I was sitting. The face, oh God, the face. It was human-like, but the features along the edges weren't fully formed. They seemed to shift and change, like something you'd see at a cellular level in a science documentary, a slow, nauseating mutation of flesh and bone. There were no eyes, Only empty sockets where eyes should have been. No hair. Gray, cold, lifeless skin oozed from the face. The nose was short, pushed into the skull like a bulldog's. A disgusting indentation. But it was the teeth that haunt me to this day. Clearly carnivorous, but unlike any jaws I'd ever seen. They weren't arranged naturally. They seemed to fill and spill out of that misshapen face, as if they knew where they were, and were trying to get out. A chaos of sharp fangs, piled and overlapping, a sight the human eye shouldn't have to witness. It stared through my very being, into my eyes and beyond my soul. It felt eternal, though I was probably frozen there for no more than 5 seconds. My heart hammered. A sharp pain stabbed my chest. I couldn't scream. I couldn't move. I could only stare into those hollow sockets, feeling the cold emptiness of something with no life, no feeling. Then, a light switched on in the house down the road. That gentle yellow glow, for a moment, was my lifeline. The creature flinched. Its stare broke from me and snapped toward the light. Then it tore through the night, sprinting into the woods on its hind legs, like a man. It moved with a speed and agility that was impossible for something so grotesquely tall. I slammed the gear into first and floored it. The old truck screamed, tires burning through first gear. Then I slammed it into second and hauled ass for home. Everything was instinct. I thought of nothing but getting the hell out of there, as fast as possible. When I made it home, both my parents were dead asleep. I barreled into the basement and into my bedroom. I pulled out every firearm I had, loaded them up, and bolted every door. I couldn't wake them. Who would believe that kind of freakish story? And at 10:30 on a Thursday night, the basement was eerily quiet. Even their dogs, which usually bark at any wildlife outside, were silent. The old post and beam house didn't creak or groan like it normally did. Nothing. Not a sound. Around 3 in the morning, I finally started to feel sleepy. I tried to lay my head down for a nap, hoping I could still go hiking at dawn. Then, I smelled it again. The smell of death. At first it was faint, but unmistakable. I told myself I was being paranoid. None of it had happened. But the more I tried to push the thought away, the stronger the odor became. More intense, until it filled the whole basement. My father's basement office has 2 large glass doors that look out over the national forest, about 500,000 acres. At last, I summoned what courage I had left and stepped out of my bedroom into the basement living room, shotgun in hand, with the built-in flashlight on. I cupped the beam with my hand so it wouldn't reveal my position until I needed it. When I turned right, from the living room into my dad's office, and shone the light through the glass doors, there it was, standing at the forest's edge, motionless, staring right at the light, unafraid, with those hollow, soulless sockets. I quickly covered my Tasco flashlight, my heart stopping cold. It had found me. It knew where I was. Panic surged up my throat like acid, but this time it was mixed with fury. I ran into the living room and flipped the switch for the outdoor floodlights. The yard exploded in harsh white light, and to my horror, it was no longer standing at the tree line. In the moment I'd covered the light and dashed to the switch, it had moved. Now it stood halfway between the house and the woods, just standing there. Still, those empty sockets seemed to swallow the light whole. It didn't flinch. It just watched. I yanked open the door, stepped onto the basement porch, and emptied the entire 12-gauge magazine in its direction. I must have hit it at least once, because it let out a scream that didn't belong to this world. It wasn't an animal's growl, or a human scream. It was a piercing, bone-rattling shriek, like the sound of a woman being brutally slaughtered. A sound you feel deep in your marrow. Instantly, it turned and bolted back into the forest, and Only then did the dog start barking, howling wildly into the night. My parents burst downstairs, demanding to know what the hell I was doing. I was panting, shaking, adrenaline tearing through me. I lied, told them a bear had gotten into the trash, and I was just scaring it off. They didn't believe me, but I knew they'd never believe the truth. I didn't sleep that night, or any night until the following Sunday. I just sat there, shotgun reloaded, waiting for that stench to return, waiting for that scream to echo again. But nothing happened. Everything seemed to go back to normal, and I didn't think about that creature again, not until about 6 years later, when I met my wife. Her mother's house sits at the mouth of a holler, maybe 4 or 5 miles from my parents' place. Up the hill are some old dog kennels. Her brother's hunting dogs used to stay there. They'd been abandoned for years, but the fencing and concrete runs were still intact. A good spot when you needed to isolate an animal. Her Great Pyrenees had gotten into it with a raccoon, killed it, of course, but its rabies shots were overdue, so we had to quarantine it for a while. Didn't bother him much. He was the kind of dog that liked being alone. One night, we were driving home after seeing a movie in the next town. It was the dog's last night in quarantine, so we walked up the trail, using our phone flashlights, to reach the kennels. He was sitting there, patient and calm, tail wagging when he saw us. We leashed him up and started heading back down toward the house. As we walked through the dark, I started to feel it. That old, heavy feeling. The same one I'd felt the night I hit that thing with my truck. The weight in the air. The sense of being watched. I didn't say anything. Didn't want to scare her. Then, the smell. That same rancid, putrid stench drifted in on the breeze. She joked, "God, what did you eat? You stink." I forced a half smile, too terrified to laugh. She caught on immediately. Her hand tightened around mine. "What is it?" she asked. All I could say was, "I'll tell you later." She'd grown up in those woods, used to hunting, used to the wild. She understood what I meant. She knew something was out there, watching us. When we finally saw the porch light of the house through the trees, we heard it, barking, coming from the kennels we'd just left. It sounded exactly like the Great Pyrenees walking beside us. A perfect imitation. The Pyrenees froze, then turned, growling, barking furiously back toward the sound. If you've ever tried to pull a 150-pound dog, you know how impossible that is. I'm 6 feet tall, weigh 240, and it took every ounce of strength I had to drag him toward the house. The barking, the fake barking, never stopped as we ran. If anything, it got closer, closer, until it felt like it was coming from inside my own head. My mother-in-law heard the screaming, and the dogs barking like crazy. She flipped on the porch floodlights. Just as we burst through the yard gate, in that blinding light, I caught a glimpse. Just a blur at first. Something massive, a dense, black shape. Charging forward, then suddenly stopping, right at the edge of the light. It stood there for maybe a fraction of a second. A giant silhouette against the night. And before turning sharply and tearing back into the woods, our Great Pyrenees was still thrashing at the chain, barking wildly into the darkness that had swallowed it. We slammed the door shut behind us. My wife turned to me, eyes wide, face pale. "Do you want to tell me what the hell that was?" she asked. I was panting, trying to catch my breath. "Yeah," I said. "Let's go inside first." I told her everything. About that night, about the truck, about those hollow eye sockets, and the scream. She listened closely, hanging on every word. Her family comes from a long line of old Appalachian granny witches and healers, so stories about strange things in the woods weren't exactly fairy tales to her. Yes, The next morning, her sister showed up. She brought herbs, salt, and a bunch of other things I didn't recognize. She came to bless the property and drive away whatever darkness had followed us. I suggested we head up to the dog pen too, just to be safe. When we got there, a chill ran down my spine, even though it was broad daylight. The kennel was completely destroyed. And I don't just mean tipped over. The concrete foundation, strong enough to hold a truck, was split clean in half. The chain link fencing had been ripped right out of the posts, like it was made of tinfoil. The wooden dog houses inside, shattered to pieces, and the whole place, even under the bright sun, reeked of death. My wife's sister didn't seem shaken. She calmly went about her work, sprinkling salt, burning herbs, murmuring words I didn't understand, before leading us back down to the house. Once we were inside, she turned to us suddenly, her face dead serious. She said, "Never go into those woods after dark. Never. Not until whatever this thing is stops following you." Long story short, my wife joined the military, and she got stationed in Delaware. For someone who'd spent her whole life surrounded by massive mountains and endless wilderness, Delaware felt lifeless. At least, that's what I thought. When we first moved into a city of over 50,000 people, thankfully, it didn't take us long to find a quiet little community down south. We bought a house and moved in fast, both of us grateful to leave the city behind and get back to the countryside. But the land in Delaware felt empty. The sparse woods here had no energy, good or bad. The ground itself didn't feel alive, the way it did back home. And so, after so long without thinking about that creature, I forgot her sister's warning. I went back to my habit of staying outside after dark, playing with our dogs in the big yard that backed up to a thin stretch of woods. Last night, I was out there with them. When it got fully dark, I lit a small fire in the pit, sipping some of that fine Appalachian cough syrup from a mason jar. As the fire began to die down, my American bulldog suddenly tore through the night, sprinting toward the woods. He had a habit of running off on little adventures, so my first instinct was to chase him down, tackle him before he could bolt. When I finally pinned his 110-pound body to the ground and hoisted him up over my shoulder, I heard barking. But the barking wasn't coming from him. The only sound coming from the dog on my shoulder was a low, guttural growl, one I'd never heard before. It was deep, threatening, primal. Something was definitely wrong. As I ran toward the house, the stench of death started filling the air again. The other two dogs must have sensed it too. They came racing to meet me at the back door. I threw the bulldog inside, slammed the door shut, locked it, and once again, loaded my gun. How the hell did it follow us? 650 miles, all the way here. When I flipped on the floodlight behind the house, a few bushes and small trees at the edge of the woods were still shaking, like something huge had just passed through. My dogs went insane all night, barking, howling, scratching at the windows, desperate to get outside. I didn't sleep a single minute, and honestly, I don't think I will for a long time. One thing I know for sure, I'll never step into those woods after dark again. Never. Not until that thing is gone. Or I am. I was born in West Virginia, and most of my childhood was spent moving from place to place, drifting along the Appalachians, then out toward the Midwest. But there was one stretch of time, just a few years, from when I was 10 to about 13, that's etched deeper into my memory than anything else. That was when we lived out in rural Kentucky, right at the base of one of the oldest mountain ranges on Earth. Those hills carried a strange kind of weight, like they'd been there since the beginning of time, silently watching everything that came and went. I lived there with my dad and my grandma. Our home sat in what felt like a natural cul-de-sac, a small hollow cradled between two ridges. Calling it a neighborhood would have been generous. Really, it was just a handful of family homes scattered along the dirt road, Behind our house rose a steep hillside, a wall of rock and tangled trees, dark and dense. The feeling there was hard to explain. It felt safe, but also suffocating, like you were being sheltered and trapped at the same time. Right after we moved in, Grandma laid down a few rules. At first, I thought they were just the usual warnings. Don't mess with wild animals. Watch out for copperheads. Never go into the woods alone. All reasonable enough, until she started talking about the stranger ones. Her voice got low, and her face turned deadly serious. If you ever hear someone calling your name from the woods, she said, even if it sounds like me, or your daddy, you do not answer. You don't go toward it. She paused. Look straight into my eyes. And if you ever see someone out there, someone you think you know, it isn't them. Turn around, walk straight home, and don't tell anyone what you saw. I laughed. I thought she was just trying to scare me. But those weren't warnings. They were rules. Rules of that land. Old ones, passed down through generations, born out of fear, and things no one dared to name. Because in those woods, among the ancient trees and the heavy darkness, something was waiting for you to make just one small mistake. And that was all it would take. We ran, listening as we went. There was no thunder, no wind, nothing but the sound of our footsteps on the wet grass and our ragged breathing. But that smell, it followed us. That burnt metallic scent clung to the air, thick, choking, until I almost wanted to throw up. When the trailer came into view across the yard, I saw the light still on in the living room. Grandma was standing in the doorway, holding a lantern. She looked at us, and the moment the light hit my dad's face, she went pale. Without a word, she motioned us inside. The door slammed shut behind us, and the lock clicked, sharp and dry. She didn't ask what we'd seen, didn't ask why we were so scared. Instead, she walked straight to the window, drew the curtains, and said softly, "It's not out there anymore." That one sentence made the air in the room go heavy. I looked at my dad. He didn't move. His face was tense, unreadable. Then, in a low, rough voice, he said, "Mom, I smelled it. It was close." She nodded, slowly, like it confirmed a fear she'd been carrying for years. Then she reached up to a shelf and took down a small glass jar. Inside was something that looked like ash and salt. She moved through the house, sprinkling a pinch into each corner. I just watched, not understanding what any of it meant, only feeling the air grow heavier, damp, colder. That night, none of us slept. Dad sat by the window with his hunting rifle in hand, staring out into the dark. I lay on the couch, pretending to be calm, but I couldn't shake the feeling that whatever it was still out there, just waiting. Sometime past midnight, the sound of insects returned. Not the soft chirping from before, but loud, frantic, like every creature out there was screaming at once. A long, shrill noise cut through the night, and my heart started pounding. Then came the knocking. Thud, thud, thud. 3 steady knocks, coming from the back wall, the side that pressed up against the hillside. Dad jumped to his feet, raising the gun toward the window. I didn't dare breathe. Grandma placed her hands on his shoulder and shook her head slowly. Then she whispered, barely audible, "It's just testing you. Don't let it know you're afraid." The knocking came again, closer, then silence. But it wasn't the kind of silence you get in the woods. It was heavier, the kind that tells you something is standing right outside, just a few feet away from the wall. I don't remember what happened after that. All I know is that I woke up on the couch when morning came. Dad was still by the window, asleep with the gun in his hands. Grandma sat at the kitchen table, staring out toward the hills, her face calm, but distant, like she already knew something we didn't. When I asked what had happened last night, she just said one thing. "You see now, There are things in those woods that know your name, but they're not people. We turned and ran for home, my dad nearly dragging me down the trail. The anger in him was gone, replaced by something else, something urgent and silent. He didn't speak. He just gripped my wrist and kept pulling. And strangely enough, his lie about the storm was starting to come true. The sky, clear just minutes ago, was now thick and gray. Clouds rolled over the ridges. The wind cut through the trees, and fat drops of rain began to fall, hard, fast, pounding against the leaves, and we broke through the trail and into the clearing. Ahead of us, the creek, the dirt road, and our porch light, only a few dozen yards away, but right then, it felt like miles. There's something strange about lightning when you're deep in the woods. Out there are no streetlights, no porch lights beyond your own. When night falls, it's heavy, thick, like velvet. Everything just melts into black, and only two dim, yellow windows glowed in the distance. Our house. Two tiny eyes staring back through the dark. And then, when lightning struck, it was like the whole world flashed white for an instant. Not like daylight, more like someone took a photograph that was far too bright, flattening everything, draining it of all color. When we reached the yard, I was still holding a piece of watermelon, half eaten, half forgotten. Somehow, chewing it made me feel safe, like things were still normal. Dad muttered something about locking the doors. And then, the first thunder rolled. Right after that, a bolt of lightning tore across the sky. The whole valley lit up. For one brief moment, I could see everything. Every leaf, every drop of rain, every line on the palm of my hand. Then it was gone. Darkness fell again, twice as deep. My eyes burned from the sudden shift. Another crash, another flash, then darkness. By the third strike, the world seemed to stop. And that's when I saw it. It wasn't close. It was standing across the road, beyond the creek, right at the edge of the tree line. Just a shape. But tall. Taller than any man I'd ever seen. And the way it stood, motionless, not even a twitch. The light vanished again. I froze, the watermelon still in my hand. A chill ran through me, not from the rain, but from instinct. That deep, ancient instinct that whispers, something's wrong. And then, the smell came back. Thick, heavy. I could taste it. That burning metallic stench, like copper and ozone and rot mixed together. I coughed hard, my throat raw like fire. Part of me tried to reason it away. A broken tree, a shadow, something explainable. But the rest of me, the instinct part, just wanted to run. Then, crack, a bolt of lightning exploded overhead. The light flared again, and it had moved. It wasn't across the road anymore. It was right there, beside the trees, at the edge of our yard. It had crossed the creek, the ditches, the road, all in the few seconds of darkness. Without a sound, it stood there, pressed against the trunk, almost blending into it, like it was part of the forest itself. I still couldn't make out its face, just that tall, thin, wrong shape. Wrong in a way that made your bones remember fear. That old, primal fear, the kind humans used to feel back when we lived in caves. I dropped the watermelon, didn't even scream, just turned and ran, as fast as I could, toward the porch light. I crashed through this door, nearly knocking my dad off his feet. It took me years to truly understand it all. Years of having my own family, steer the story into something softer, safer, easier to live with. Any time I brought up the shadow or that metallic smell, they'd brush it off, smile, tell me I just had an overactive imagination. It was just a bad dream, son, my dad would say. Every kid's afraid of the dark. And I believed him. Over time, I convinced myself it was nothing. Just a storm. Just fear. Maybe even a stray black bear. That memory sank deeper and deeper, buried under the dust of growing up, until it almost disappeared. Until I was in my 20s. That night was Halloween. I was at a small family party with my cousins. Everyone was laughing, telling ghost stories, and I decided to share my real one. I told everything. The silence, the smell, the shadow that moved faster than sight, and the chickens, torn apart without a drop of blood left. As I spoke, I noticed my aunt, standing in the corner of the room, just staring at me. Her eyes were wide, frozen, and when I finished, she rushed toward me, her face red with anger and fear. "Don't you tell them that story," she screamed. "Don't you bring that evil into this house." The room went silent. No one laughed. No one said a word. Her reaction wasn't that of someone who thought I was lying. It was the reaction of someone who believed every word and was terrified that I had spoken them out loud. In that moment, something shattered in my head. I realized they hadn't been trying to protect me from my memories. They were trying to protect all of us from it. Because saying its name, even just remembering, might be enough to call it back. Years later, wandering through Reddit, deep in the strangest corners of the internet, I found others. People from all across the Appalachians. They talked about the same thing. The sudden silence, the smell of ozone and burnt metal, the tall shape that moved too fast to follow. And they all called it by the same name. A name that made my blood run cold, because I'd heard it once before, in my aunt's terrified scream that Halloween night. Goatman. In Kentucky, they call it the Pope Lick Monster, a half-man, half-goat creature said to lurk beneath an old train trestle. But what I saw wasn't under any bridge. It was in the woods, right behind our house. And what haunts me the most isn't its shape. I can't even remember its face, its eyes, its hands. What I can't forget is the smell. That burnt, metallic stench, so strong I could taste it in the air. I've never smelled it again. But if you ever find yourself walking through those Kentucky hills, the ones older than humankind itself, remember what my grandma said. If the forest suddenly goes silent, and you hear someone calling your name from the dark, don't answer. I once had a very close friend. Let's call her Annie, to keep her identity private. Saying Annie liked hiking would be an understatement. She was the kind of person who seemed more at home sleeping under the trees than under a roof. Most of her free time was spent out on the trails, especially through the old, rolling hills of the Appalachians, stretching across Tennessee and North Carolina. Whether it was the blistering heat of summer or the biting cold of winter, Annie was always out there, alone, in the woods. She wasn't a weekend camper kind of person. She belonged to the wilderness. That summer, she decided to challenge herself with the biggest trip she'd ever attempted, hiking a long stretch of the Appalachian Trail, completely on her own. She wasn't planning to walk the entire route from Georgia to Maine, but her goal was still ambitious. Start at Springer Mountain, the southern terminus in Georgia, and finish at Shenandoah National Park in Virginia. Hundreds of miles, completely solo. I was totally on board with it. Honestly, I was a little worried. The kind of worry you feel when someone you care about heads off into the wild. But I knew she was careful, experienced, and well prepared. I helped her pack, studied the maps with her, sorted the trail food, checked her water filter. I even helped plan out her resupply points along the way. We had a special agreement, too. I'd meet her at Newfound Gap, a mountain pass along the trail inside Great Smoky Mountains National Park, where I was living at the time. I'd bring her some extra supplies, maybe a few luxury treats she missed, and hike with her for a few days. It was the perfect plan. The morning she set off, I drove her to the trailhead. The air was full of excitement, and that rich, earthy scent unique to the Georgia woods. I still remember watching her tighten her straps, wave goodbye, and disappear. That small, determined figure fading into the green tunnel of the forest. The first few weeks went exactly as planned. I got a few postcards from her along the way, sent from tiny trail towns where she stopped to pick up supplies. Every message was full of energy. Doing great. Beautiful weather. Right on schedule. Everything was going perfectly. Then July came, the month we were supposed to meet. Before she left, we'd carefully mapped out her pace, down to the day she was expected to reach our meeting point. It wasn't just any stop. It was Mount LeConte de Lodge. If you've ever been to the Smoky Mountains, you know why LeConte Lodge is special. Perched near the summit of the third highest peak in the range, it's only accessible by foot. No roads, no shortcuts. You have to hike up to get there. You have to book months, even years, in advance, just to stay a single night. We'd made our reservation the previous winter. The date was fixed, no wiggle room at all. Annie knew that better than anyone. If she missed it, she wouldn't just lose the reservation. It would throw off her entire schedule for weeks. That meeting point wasn't just a stop along the way. It was the anchor of her whole journey. A few days before our planned meeting, right on schedule, Annie's final postcard arrived. It was sent from the last resupply stop before she entered the deep woods of the national park. I got it on July 2nd. Our meeting was set for the 7th. Feeling great, she wrote in her familiar, slightly messy but energetic handwriting. Still on track. See you at LeConte on the 7th. Can't wait for a hot meal. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. She'd hiked hundreds of miles, and she was still doing fine. She was really pulling it off. When July 7th came, I packed everything for our meetup. A few of her favorite candy bars, fresh batteries for her light, some fruit, a few small luxuries I knew she'd be thrilled to have. My boyfriend came with me that day. He planned to hike up with me, stay until Annie arrived safely, and then head back down alone. The weather was perfect. We climbed the winding mountain trail, tired, but excited. Cool air drifted around us, and thin, smoky clouds curled through the deep valleys below. The view was breathtaking. The closer we got to the top, the more I could picture Annie, sitting on the porch somewhere, sipping hot cocoa, grinning when she saw me. But she wasn't there. We went straight to the front desk to ask if she'd checked in. The woman behind the counter flipped through the guest book. Annie, no. I don't see anyone by that name, she said, frowning slightly. I'm sorry. I forced a smile. That was okay. It made sense. This was a long trail, after all. A few hours of delay was nothing unusual. She was probably just running a little behind. We brought our things to the cabin, then headed to the main lodge, had some coffee, read, relaxed. But every few minutes, I'd glance out toward the trail. Every time someone appeared in the distance, my heart would jump, only to sink again when I realized it wasn't her. Then the sun started to set. The warm gold light turned orange, then faded into deep violet. The mountain chill began to creep in, and still, she hadn't arrived. That's when the real worry started to take hold. We went back to the front desk. Are you absolutely sure she hasn't checked in? I asked, my voice trembling a little. The woman shook her head. No one by that name. I'm sorry. We returned to our room. My boyfriend tried to calm me down, his tone steady, reasonable. Maybe she's just slow, he said. This section of the trail is one of the steepest on the entire Appalachian route. She could have gotten tired, maybe decided to camp for the night. If she doesn't make it tonight, she'll be here tomorrow for sure. I wanted to believe that, but I couldn't sleep that night. Every sound outside, the wind, footsteps on the porch, the creak of the floorboards, made me jump. Each time, I thought, maybe that's her. But it never was. The night just went on, silent and strangely heavy. By morning, still no Annie. We sat in the lobby for hours, staring toward the trail. No one came. By around 2 in the afternoon, We couldn't sit still anymore. We decided to hike back down the trail, in the direction she was supposed to be coming from, hoping to run into her along the way. "We'll be back soon," I told the woman at the counter. "If she shows up while we're gone, please tell her to wait for us." We hiked for hours. By the time we made it back, around 5, exhausted and out of breath, I still held on to a sliver of hope, but the answer was the same. No, she still hadn't arrived. From that moment on, everything became a blur, confused, unreal. We had to leave. Our reservation was over, and they needed the cabin for other guests. I can't even describe how it felt, walking down that mountain without her beside me. A heavy, hollow feeling, a mix of guilt, fear, and disbelief. We left our contact information, begging them to call us the moment she showed up. But days passed, and no one heard a thing from Annie. Eventually, we called the police. Search teams were formed, rangers, officers, volunteers, combing every mile between where she'd last been seen and the meeting point at LeConte. And from that point on, things started to get very, very strange. It took nearly 10 days before they found her. When I heard the news, I almost went numb. It wasn't the relief I'd expected. It was a cold, sinking shock. Annie was alive, but that was the only word that fit: alive. They found her deep in a ravine, almost 30 miles off the Appalachian Trail, 30 miles off course, through some of the roughest, thickest forest you can imagine. Her body was bruised, twisted from exhaustion and hunger, just a shadow of the person she once was. It was over a day before they allowed me to see her in the hospital. I'd tried to prepare myself for the worst, but nothing could have prepared me for what I saw. The person lying in that hospital bed wasn't the Annie I knew. Her eyes, the same eyes that used to light up whenever she talked about the mountains, were empty now. They looked straight through me, like I wasn't even there. She was all skin and bone, covered in cuts, bruises, and insect bites. And what chilled me the most was the silence. She didn't speak. Not to the police, not to the doctors, not to anyone. I sat beside her, holding her frail hand. It felt like holding a dry stick. I called her name, tried to talk to her, begged her to say something, but she just stared into nothing. The doctor said it was acute psychological trauma, but I knew from the look in her eyes she'd seen something no one should ever have to see. It took years, therapy, sleepless nights, endless nightmares, before she finally told me what happened. Not everything, just part of it. The part she never told the police. After that day, she never hiked again. No more mountains, no more trails. She threw away her favorite boots, the ones she used to be so proud of. She never set foot in the woods again. And honestly, I don't think she ever wanted me to share this story. But I believe people need to know, because whatever happened in the Smokies, it might not just be happening there. She told me, in a flat, quiet, almost lifeless voice. I left the shelter around 8 in the morning. July 5th, she began. I hiked all day, felt great, good energy. Late in the afternoon, I stopped for a snack and rested a bit before heading to my campsite for the night. And then I heard it. Voices, men's voices. They were far away at first. I didn't think much of it, figured it was just other hikers, but no one ever passed by. The voices came and went, faint, scattered, carried by the wind. I waited maybe 15 minutes. Still nothing. Finally, I told myself I was imagining things. I packed up my stuff and kept going. That night, I set up camp just before sunset, hung my food on the bear line, crawled into my sleeping bag, started reading. Then, I heard them again. The voices, louder this time, closer. The accent was thick, Appalachian, for sure, but I couldn't make out what they were saying. I held my breath, waiting for footsteps, for a branch to snap, anything to show someone was there. But nothing. Just those voices, drifting through the trees, like they were part of the forest itself. I shut my eyes and told myself, "You're just hearing things, Annie." The next morning, I went outside and found some of my food packets torn open, scattered on the ground. I thought it was squirrels, or maybe a raccoon, but then I noticed my backpack was still zipped. No bite marks, no claw marks. I tried not to think about it. I packed up fast and left. That day, I moved quicker than usual, almost running. I just wanted to get as far away from that place as I could, but then the voices came back. This time, they didn't fade. They stayed, always a little behind me, like they were following. I kept looking back. Nothing. No footsteps, no movement, just whispering, soft, endless whispering. I decided not to stop. That night, I'd hike straight through. If someone was out there watching me, I wasn't going to be trapped inside a tent. When night fell, I turned on my flashlight and kept walking, slow, careful. The voices had gone quiet for a while, and I started to think maybe I'd lost them. Then I reached a small clearing and stopped to rest. My feet were burning. I hadn't even taken my pack off when I heard it. Right behind me. There she is. A man's voice, rough, low, cold as stone, right at the back of my neck. And I spun around, raised my flashlight, and saw them. 2 men. Dirty, bearded, their eyes filled with something cruel, almost inhuman. The way they looked at me, it felt like they were peeling the skin off my face with their eyes. I screamed and ran. I ran the other way, as fast as I could, and I could hear them chasing me. Bare feet slapping against the dirt, crashing through the brush. When I crested a hill, I veered off the main trail, diving into the woods, crawling through the undergrowth, tearing through thorns, anything to get away. By the time dawn broke, I was still running. For the next 2 weeks, I hid. I could hear them out there, always close. Their voices echoing through the trees, saying things that made my stomach turn. I saw them sometimes, moving through the woods, muttering about what they were going to do to me. They wore nothing but tattered shorts, their bodies covered in mud, long, filthy hair. And those eyes, those predatory eyes, Ori, I knew if they found me, I'd never make it out alive. I survived on stream water, rationed what little food I had left, and waited, hoping someone would notice I was gone. And finally, a park ranger and a search team found me. Silence. She stopped there, her voice trembling, barely above a whisper. I didn't ask her anything else. I just knew one thing. Whatever she saw out there, it's still out there. A few weeks after Annie came home and got out of the hospital, she started digging. I think she just couldn't stop obsessing over what had happened. She needed to know who they were, where they came from, and why they were there. And then she found the answer. Turns out, there really are people who live hidden up in those mountains. They're not hikers or campers or some lost drifters. They're fugitives, men who escaped the law, murderers, rapists, violent offenders, people who should have spent their lives behind bars, or worse. Instead, they chose to disappear, to melt into the wilderness, living completely off the grid, outside society, where no one could ever find them. People call them the wild men, and they're not a myth. They're very, very real. Annie, she stumbled right into 2 of them. After hearing what she told me, I stopped hiking too. Honestly, I don't think I could ever go back to those trails again. That experience changed her forever. And in a way, it changed me too. The woman who once loved the wilderness more than anything now can't even step into a city park without freezing up. And she told me once, that kind of fear never really goes away. It just lies there, waiting for the day you're foolish enough to wander back into the wild. And truthfully, I understand that feeling. Because if the wild men really do live out there, they're not just in the Smokies. So if one day you decide to go hiking through those beautiful, endless mountains, keep your eyes open, always look behind you, and never, ever think you're alone out there. Because the wild men are still out there, and they're always watching. I'm 23 years old, and I live in New York. When you grow up in a place like New York, the world around you is always full of noise, lights, and people. The city never sleeps, and it never really gets quiet. Everything's always within reach, fast, convenient, and right there when you want it. But my family was different. Specifically, my grandparents. They lived somewhere completely opposite, a remote patch of nowhere, deep in West Virginia. And when I say remote, I'm not exaggerating. I mean the kind of place that's deep in the boonies, where even Google Maps might give up. Their nearest neighbor, if you could even call them that, lived over an hour's drive away. The closest town had just a handful of scattered houses and a single Walmart, the only thing that made the place look even remotely civilized. Last summer, my grandfather, let's call him Robert, had hip surgery. Most of my relatives live on the West Coast, and my grandmother, Muriel, is old and frail. She couldn't take care of him by herself. Since I was the closest, they called me, and being the good grandson, I agreed. I'd stay for 2 weeks to help him recover. The first week went by smoothly enough. My job was simple: help Grandpa Robert move around, fetch things for him, and most importantly, take his dog out for walks. That dog was a blue heeler named Rocky. Normally, Grandpa would walk Rocky twice a day, once in the morning and again in the evening, through the woods behind the house. But after his surgery, that job became mine. And that was the part I hated most. Actually, the part I always feared. Even as a kid, I never liked those woods. Every time we visited, my cousins and I felt something was just off about that place. It wasn't just dark or dense. It had this strange heaviness to it, a silence so thick, it felt like the air itself was heavier. The moment you stepped past the first line of trees, every sound seemed to disappear. And now, even at 23, after years of living in a city that never stops making noise, that same unsettling feeling never really went away. We burst through the door. I was gasping for breath, and Rocky was whining, his claws scraping wildly against the wooden floor. My grandparents were sitting in the living room, the faint blue light from the old TV washing over their faces. Everything inside the house felt too normal. The smell of stale coffee, the ticking clock, all of it clashing with the raw panic I'd just escaped out there. "What's going on?" my grandfather asked, struggling to his feet. "Why were you running?" I tried to catch my breath and told them everything. The whistling, the dead silence in the woods, Rocky's reaction. My words came out broken, but enough for them to understand. And when I looked up, I saw it. Their faces had changed. Not the usual kind of worry. They were truly afraid. They exchanged a glance, quick, silent, knowing. And then my grandmother, Muriel, did something that made my blood run cold. She leaned forward, her old eyes fixed on mine. She didn't ask, "Are you okay?" She didn't ask, "Who do you think it was?" She just whispered one question, small, urgent, trembling. "Did you whistle back?" I froze. "What? No, of course not. Why would I?" At that, her face relaxed, like a massive weight had been lifted off her chest. She closed her eyes for a second, then nodded. "Good," she said, voice low but firm. "You didn't hear anything. It was just the wind. Just ignore it." I stared at her. Ignore it? Grandma, the dog went crazy. That wasn't the wind. It was a melody. She turned to my grandfather. Robert, take the dog to the kitchen. Then she looked back at me, her eyes sharp, serious in a way that made arguing impossible. You didn't hear anything, she repeated. And you will never, never whistle back at anything coming from those woods. Do you understand? I asked why. I told her I was 23, not some kid afraid of the dark, but she just shook her head. The fear on her face had hardened into something else, pure stubbornness. I won't talk about it, she said. You don't need to know. Now go to bed. I did what she said, but sleep never came. I lay there on the creaky old bed, listening to the house settle, thinking about whatever was out there, something my grandparents had apparently learned to live with. What scared me most wasn't the whistling. It was the way she refused to talk about it. She knew what it was. And it seemed like it followed rules. The next morning, she told me the dog walking routine would change. Instead of the woods, she said gently, just walk Rocky around the house. That'll be enough. So I did. Every evening, I walked Rocky in circles around the house. Maybe 50 laps. Boring, sure, but safe. As long as we stayed in the porch light. Until Friday night. My second to last night there. I was on my 30th lap, maybe more, when I heard it again. That whistle. Exactly the same tune, clear and bright. But this time, it wasn't coming from deep in the woods. It came from behind the garage, maybe 30 feet away. It had left the forest. It was in the yard. I didn't think. I grabbed Rocky, dragged him inside so fast he nearly stumbled. I slammed the door, threw the bolt, locked the chain. Then I ran to my room, put on my headphones, blasted music at full volume, and did exactly what my grandmother told me to do. Pretend nothing happened. I left that Sunday. During those last 2 days, I stopped taking Rocky outside after dark. I only let him roam the backyard. During daylight, I never heard the whistling again. As my car rolled down that long dirt road, toward the highway, back to New York, I could feel it, a weight slowly lifting off my shoulders. But at the same time, something stayed with me. That silence, that feeling of being watched, followed from somewhere deep in the trees, and it didn't leave. I still don't know what was out there. I told the story to a few friends. Their first reaction was, must have been a skinwalker. But that didn't make sense. That legend belongs to the Navajo, the far southwest. This was Appalachia, a very different place. Later, my girlfriend told her parents about it. They're Yemeni Muslims, and they had another explanation. They said that, back home, people believe if someone whistles at night, especially in lonely, quiet places, it means a jinn is nearby. That's how they communicate, or sometimes how they lure you. And if you whistle back, you're inviting them in. I don't know what to believe. I'm a city guy. I believe in what I can see. But I saw the dog's reaction, and I saw the fear in my grandmother's eyes. What still haunts me most, it isn't the sound itself, no matter how eerie it was. It's her question. Did you whistle back? She didn't ask what it looked like, or where it came from. She only asked that, as if she already knew exactly what would happen. Was if I had, though. And then came that cold, deliberate denial. You didn't hear anything. That's when I realized. They knew. My grandparents knew something was out there. They'd lived with it for years. Bound by a silent, fearful agreement. They knew the rules. And that night, I, the clueless outsider, almost broke them. Appalachia is an ancient land, and I think it still keeps secrets. Older than itself. I met one of them, and I swear, I'll never go back there. Not after the sun goes down. If you've ever set foot in the mountains after dark, be careful, be respectful, and most important of all, never touch the skulls. The first time someone told me that, I laughed. I figured they were just superstitious old-timers. See, I just moved to this little town, deep in the Appalachians, looking for a fresh start. I'd spent my whole life in the city, the noise, the smog. I was just sick of it. The idea of a house out in the woods, no one around for miles. It sounded like paradise. It's why I bought the property the second I saw it, and don't get me wrong, the house was beautiful. Sure, it had its quirks. The porch squeaked every time I stepped on it. The kitchen was a little cramped, but overall, it was oddly charming. Quaint, that's the word the realtor kept using as she showed me around, and I had to admit, she was right. But the real selling point was the woods out back, the feeling of owning a piece of wild, untamed nature. I was captivated by it. I still remember my first trip into the town, down at the base of the mountain. It was tiny, the kind of place where everybody knows everybody. And when a new face like mine shows up, heads turn. Still, most folks were friendly. Asked me where I was from, what I did for a living. You know, the usual small talk. Mr. Faraday, who ran the only general store in the area, was the first one to mention the woods. You planning on doing some hiking? He asked, bagging up my groceries. Absolutely, I said with a laugh. He just nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. The woods are safe enough during the day, he said slowly, his voice dropping a little. But when the sun goes down, you head home. If not, you're just asking for trouble, wild animals, or worse, getting lost. I chuckled. Anything special I should worry about? Aren't the black bears around here pretty shy? You just yell at them and they run off, unless you stumble on a mama bear. It ain't just bears, he replied. Elk, foxes, wild boar. And wolves. I paused. Wolves? I thought wolves went extinct in the Appalachians ages ago. He just shrugged. Didn't say any more. Just be careful out there. Bring water. Don't go messing with things. You see something pretty, take a picture, and leave it be. I nodded. Easy enough? Anything else? I asked, mostly just to be polite. He looked at me, his gaze strangely intense. If you see a skull or bones, don't touch them. If one's blocking your path, you go around. For a second, I felt a shiver. But then he broke into a smile, and the tension was gone. You come back soon, you will be here, he said cheerfully. Got fresh produce specials every week. Looking back on it now, I really should have listened to him. Really listened. The first few times I ventured into those woods, it was exactly what I had imagined. I'd usually go in the late morning, after the fog burned off and the sun was filtering through the canopy. There was an old, overgrown trail behind my house, but it was still clear enough to follow. The forest was just alive. Birds chirping, leaves rustling, little things scurrying through the underbrush. There were plants and flowers I'd never seen before, at least not in the city. I'd go early, before it got too hot. Always brought a bottle of water and a good pair of boots. The trail went on for what felt like miles, right up until it split in two. That was always my turning point. I didn't dare go any further. The last thing I needed was to get lost out there. No signal, no way back. But then, work changed. My mornings weren't free anymore. The only way to keep up the habit was to go after I clocked out, late afternoon. I still went, even though by the time I headed back, the sky was already turning that deep, burnt orange. The sun would be gone, hidden behind the ridge, leaving just that last bit of fading light. At first, I didn't notice much difference between the morning and evening hikes. Just fewer birds singing. But then, little things started to pop up. Things I tried to ignore. First, there were the trees. Some of the trunks had these long, deep claw marks. I told myself it was just bears. But they were too high up and too sharp. They looked almost deliberate. Not like any animal track I'd ever seen. Then came the birds. Normally, they just quiet down as it gets dark. But one evening, the second my foot hit the trail, the entire forest just went silent, completely, like someone had flipped a switch. The silence was so thick I could hear my own heartbeat. I calmed myself down. It was just the season changing, days getting shorter, nights longer. I kept hiking, but I'd only go about a mile in before turning back. Even though I didn't believe the warnings from the townsfolk, who seemed to get more and more agitated when I mentioned my hikes, I wasn't about to push my luck. And then I saw it. A deer skull. It was sitting right in the middle of the path, bone white, cracked, and bare. It hadn't been there on my way up the mountain. I was sure of it. Which meant someone, or something, had put it there while I was deeper in the woods. I froze, scanning the trees. The air felt cold. I had that prickling feeling, like I was being watched. "Hello?" I called out, my voice shaky. No answer, just the wind. The thought of having to walk past that thing for a day made my skin crawl. So, I did the stupidest thing I could have done. I grabbed a stick, jammed it through the skull's empty eye socket, took a deep breath, and flung it, hard, into the woods. I heard a dull thud as it hit a tree, and then it was gone, lost in the leaf litter. I dropped the stick and hurried back to the house, a chill running right down my spine. And that is when the howling started. I woke up in the middle of the night, startled. A long, mournful howl, echoing from somewhere out there. It was cold, empty. It sounded sorrowful, but threatening at the same time. I lay there, listening, my heart pounding. I put on some quiet music, just trying to get back to sleep. For the whole next week, I was woken up by that same howl. Every night, each night, it sounded closer. Each night, it lasted longer. I started having to sleep with music on, just to drown it out. When I asked people in town, nobody had heard a thing. Mr. Faraday just shook his head. "Didn't hear anything?" the pharmacist said. "Probably just an injured animal." The waitress at the diner just gave me a little smile. "Nobody heard it. Sweetheart, you just make sure your doors are locked up tight." The next time I went into the woods, I left right after work. I just wanted a peaceful afternoon, to clear my head before dark. I tried to convince myself the howling was just some lost animal. A coyote, maybe, or even the wind. And the townsfolk, they were just having a little fun with the new guy. But something had changed, visibly. The trees with the claw marks. They were closer now, just a few hundred yards from my backyard. I tried to brush it off. Bears, maybe elk. But deep down, I knew. It just didn't feel right. I followed the familiar path, past the ferns and the moss-covered rocks. When I got to the split, I sat down on a fallen log, took a drink of water, and just breathed in the mountain air. But for some reason, the air felt heavy today. It didn't feel clean. When I stood up to head back, I realized what it was. The silence. It wasn't peaceful. It was a dead silence. Not a single bird. No crickets. No rustling squirrels. Just me. And the woods. Holding their breath. A cold dread ran down my spine. That feeling of being watched, the one that had been lurking for weeks, now felt like it was pressed right up against my back. I could almost feel its breath, cold and damp, on the nape of my neck. I spun around, searching. Nothing. Just the silent, bare trees. Staring. I didn't want to be there another second. I started to turn back, and almost fell right over. Another skull. This time, it wasn't a deer. It was an elk. Massive. The antlers still intact, bleached white as if they'd been scrubbed clean. It was placed neatly in the middle of the path, its empty sockets aimed right at me. A surge of anger, hot and sudden, flooded me. "Who is messing with me?" I screamed into the forest, my voice echoing off the trees. "This isn't funny." No one answered. Only the wind, which was so light it felt like it was holding its breath, too. I looked around, trying to spot the prankster, but there was nothing. No movement, no sound. I was going to do what I did last time, pick it up, throw it. But just as I bent down, Mr. Faraday's warning echoed in my head. "If you see a skull, don't touch it. You go around." I stopped, swallowed hard. I took a deep breath, and I stepped around it. I didn't look back. And I ran all the way home, but it came back. The next day, same spot, the same skull, right in the middle of the path. I gritted my teeth, went around it, took the long way, avoiding it. The day after that, it was there again, right at the bend, where I couldn't avoid it. That was enough. The fear turned to rage. I yelled out, "Fine, you win." I didn't bother with a stick. I bent down, grabbed the heavy antlers, and with all my strength, I hurled it as far as I could into the woods. I didn't care where it landed. I just wanted it gone. The second it left my hands, I turned and ran, my heart hammering. When I got to the house, I slammed the door, bolted every lock. I was shaking, just standing in my kitchen, still feeling like someone, or something, was watching me through the glass. I glanced outside, nothing, but I knew it was still there. That night, there was no howling. Instead, there was creaking. On my porch, the heavy sound of old wood, groaning like someone was taking slow, heavy steps. I opened my eyes. My heart stopped. I lay perfectly still, afraid to even breathe. Then, a low, wet growl. Right outside my bedroom window, I pulled the covers up, my pulse pounding. The growling stopped, replaced by a howl, long, guttural, loud enough to vibrate the window frame. I could feel it in my bones. It wasn't far away. It was here, right outside. I bolted up, ran straight to the bathroom, the only room with no windows. I slammed the door, locked it, and curled up in the bathtub, covering my ears. I just sat there until my alarm went off at 7 a.m. and the first light of day came through the curtains. And it just kept happening. Every single night. The creaking on the porch, the growl, and then the howl, until sunrise. It was the fourth night, or maybe the fifth. I honestly don't remember. I'd lost all track of time. I wasn't sleeping. I wasn't eating. I was just sitting in the bathtub, listening to the growling and the howling, feeling like my house wasn't a shelter anymore. It was a cage. I was living on coffee and fear, and the combination had me in a constant, trembling shake. The second the first light of morning came through the blinds, I bolted for my car. I drove straight to town, my knuckles white on the steering wheel. The general store wasn't even open yet. I just sat in my car, staring at the door, probably looking like a lunatic, when Mr. Faraday finally showed up and started unlocking the place. I nearly burst through the door. He took one look at me and just said, "You look awful, my son. If you need sleep, go see the doctor." I yelled, my voice cracking. "There's something at my house. I think it's that wolf I told you about." His hand paused on his keys. He was quiet for a few seconds. Then he called to his clerk. "Sarah, watch the front. I'll be in the back." I followed him out back. He lit a cigarette, took a long drag, and said, point blank, "I told you not to touch the bones." I just broke. I started sobbing. "I didn't mean to. It kept appearing. I just want to know what it is." "Mr. Faraday looked at me, his face unreadable. 2 weeks ago, there was a deer skull. I saw it, too, but I didn't touch it. I used a stick." He stared hard at me. "What happened after you touched it?" I stammered. "After that, it started howling. It was far away at first." He nodded slowly, his voice gravelly. "No, that wasn't a wolf. But you've brought it here now." I asked him what to do, and he told me to buy meat, red meat, as fresh as I could get. Then go home, wait until dusk, take it up the trail, put it down, and walk away. Don't look back, and no matter what I heard, run. I asked him, "Will that make it leave?" He just said, "Not likely. You're just trying to make amends." I was furious. "Amends for what? I didn't do anything." He just replied, "Around here, disrespect is enough." I did what he said, bought the meat, went home, and waited. As the sky started to bleed red, I took the meat up into the woods, placing it right where the skull had been. I saw fresh claw marks on the trees, the sap still weeping. I didn't want to know what made them. I turned to leave. I only made it a few steps before I heard the growl, low, deep, and so close I felt it vibrate in my chest. Then, heavy footsteps, the sound of leaves and breaking twigs. I didn't think. I ran. I could clearly hear the sound of wet, tearing sounds behind me, like something ripping into raw flesh. When the house came into view, I almost cried with relief. I knew I shouldn't look back. Faraday's voice was ringing in my ears, but I did. Just one glance. And I wish to God I hadn't. It was right behind me. It wasn't a wolf. It wasn't a dog. I don't know what it was, but it was not natural. I screamed, scrambled up the porch, and slammed the door, locking it. The impact shook the whole house. I looked through the blinds. It was standing there, under the dim porch light. Its body was wrong, mangled, a mix of skin and fur, with arms that hung too long, ending in claws like knives. Every step was a crack of bone. Its head, it was distorted, stretched out like it had been pulled. Its eyes glowed red, and its mouth, it opened wider than any jaw should, so wide I thought the skin would rip. It stopped. It looked right at me, and then it smiled, a sick, human smile. The growling was gone, replaced by a laugh, a hoarse, mangled sound, almost mimicking a human. And then, from the woods, other laughs answered it. When I looked closer, into the darkness, I saw them, dozens of other red eyes, all of them, staring right at me. I don't know how long I was in that bathroom. Hours, maybe. The shrieking laughter outside finally died down. but it was replaced by sounds that were even worse. Scratching, moaning, and then a steady, heavy thud, thud, thud. Like someone was throwing something onto my porch, one at a time. Slow, deliberate. It sounded like a petulant child throwing a tantrum. Only these toys were much heavier, and the sound they made was wet. I just curled back up in the tub, shaking like a kid. I prayed the windows and the locks would hold. There was no doubt left. I had seen them, and they had seen me. When the first pale gray light of morning filtered through the blinds, I finally dared to open my eyes. Everything was unnervingly silent. I waited until the sun was fully up, before I unlocked the bathroom door and I saw the entire porch. It was covered in skulls. Dozens, maybe hundreds of them. Every kind: deer, bear, elk, even wild boar. Some were bone white and cracked, others were black with rot, moss growing in the eye sockets, and some were still slick with blood, bright red, sitting in their own gore. But the last one, the one placed right at my doorstep, was human. I wanted to run. I wanted to bolt for my car, just crush them all under my tires. But I didn't dare. I remembered what Faraday said. I knew I couldn't touch them. So I just took a deep, shuddering breath, and I stepped over them, one by one, trying not to let my boot heel even graze the bone. When I drove into town, everything looked terrifyingly normal. People were out walking. The diner was open. You could smell pastries on the breeze. But every single person, they avoided my gaze. No one waved. No one said a word. The entire town felt heavy, braced for something terrible. I stormed into the general store. Faraday was at the register. He looked at me, and his expression wasn't concern anymore. It was fury. "I told you not to look," he said, his voice a tight, suppressed hiss. They're everywhere," I stammered. "My whole porch is." "The entire town heard them last night." He slammed his fist on the counter. "Because of you. You didn't just invite them to your home. You let them know you saw them. And now they know that we know." I went cold. "What do you mean?" Faraday stared at me. His eyes filmed over, like fog. "You think we didn't know they were out there? We have an arrangement. They stay in the woods. We stay out here. Everyone keeps to their own side. But you broke the truce." "I'll leave, Vache," I said, my voice trembling. "I'll sell the house. I'll go back to the city. I'll never come back." He laughed. A dry, humorless sound. "No, son. You're marked. You saw them, and they saw you. You go anywhere, they'll just follow. You'll just be taking this curse somewhere else." I whispered. "Then what do I do?" He shrugged. "You clean up the mess you made. Sunset tonight. The diner at the edge of town. A party is heading out. You're going with them. And if you don't..." He paused, his voice dropping. "Then we'll hunt you ourselves. First." So now I'm here, sitting in this old diner. The air smells like burnt grease and gunpowder. Everyone's quiet. Everyone's scared, but no one's saying it. They gave me a shotgun, showed me how to load it, how to brace it against my shoulder so the kick doesn't tear it from my hands. Faraday said they've done this before. He calls them the Appalachian Ravagers. He told me not to wander off. Keep the man next to me in my sights at all times, because they like to pick people off, drag them away, and take their heads. That's how they collect the shells they gave me. He said the priest blessed them, dipped in holy water. It sounds insane, but I don't have a choice. I have never even held a gun before tonight, let alone hunted. I'm writing this down. Just in case. If I don't make it back, at least someone will know what happened. They'll just call it a hunting accident. Just like all the others. The sun's almost gone now. The priest is out in the parking lot, saying a prayer. The others are loading their rifles into the trucks, and as I'm writing this, I can hear them. Out in the woods. That laughter. That long, mangled, echoing laugh. And it's getting closer.